Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me. Another fascinating book I've been reading. A continuation of The Occult and the Third Reigh. '88 Part 3. So we left off with the book is falling apart. The Gnostic or Supreme Knowledge. Now think about that. Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike. The Bible for the Freemasons. Apparently into cosmology and ancient history, i.e. mythology. Helena Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine. Ancient history, cosmology, divas, spirits, planets, stars. So I was going to just jump into the next chapter, Centers of Initiation. But suffice it for me to say that I did read it, all of it, and it goes into the sequences of events of the different initiation schools, even mentioning Osiris or the Rosicrucian, like I'm reading right here, Egyptian antiquity. I'll just flip through it and read some words. Beast, men, and gods, Nazis, Hyperborea, sectarian, Jesus, pagan, Catholic Church. It's all it's all revealed. And the mystery of the Templars revealed. Virtues of knowledge. And apparently they think that we're defiling the world by our materialism. Where have we heard that before? The New Age? And then the next one I was going to do, Nietzsche, however you say his name, and the Supermen. Reading on the back of this page here. And if the Wagner, the famous conductor, opera, who wrote plays, The Twilight of the Gods. The two prime initiators of the Third Reich were Friedrich Nietzsche, trying to say it right, and Richard Wagner. Of course, chronologically speaking, one comes later than the other. Nietzsche's declaration, God is dead, and was the offspring with its man-God substitute, which the Nazis transformed into Supermen. There's a lot here to read, but I have to draw the line somewhere. I can't read the whole entire book. If the Wagner, Twilight of the Gods, prefigures the Nietzschean Twilight of the Idols, there is no accident, but rather the living proof of an ideological current made all the more destructive by virtue of its being underground. So a philosophy for the elitists to control the people, and the countless initiation schools, mystery school of Babylon, all over the world. So Nietzsche, I guess one of the forerunners of nihilism, which means don't believe in anything. So where I am going to take this next video, on this book that's falling apart, is Wagner the Troubadour. Troubadour. Can't see. Wagner the Troubadour. So I'll put my falling apart book on the ground. So anyways, back then, 1813, they didn't have radio, TV, movie theaters, per se, as we have today. They had troubadours. So basically they were these play actors like Shakespeare, and they would travel around doing plays. Was how they entertain people, and you could even call it slightly just another form of teaching the people, informing the people, swaying the people's minds. Push it to the limits, deception, propaganda. Promoting one religious ideology over another. And there was this schism between the Catholic Roman Church. I guess we could say it was all a disguise for Caesarism. Ever since Nero, the last Caesar, I believe, did so many crazy things that Rome fell. So then they adopted the Christian religion as its own and established the popehood and all the bishops and priests, scattering them throughout the world, forcing this will, I guess, that the Pope sits in for God. But a lot of people were disturbed by the Catholic Church in Rome because it was quite corrupt. I think even one pope that I've been reading about, we'll probably read about it here, had this beautiful mistress that he took around with him everywhere. And apparently they even had a string of bordellos, prostitution houses, where they were making a little money, probably enjoying the prostitution of the business itself. So the opposition were some of the ancient religion, the pagans, the Gnostics, and when the Catholic Church came down with an iron hand on the Knights Templars, apparently they took refuge in with the Cathars and the Manichaeisms and the pagan, Gnostic, secret mystery school religious cults. Hope all that made sense. The point here is these people are serious. We have the Freemasonic lodges all over the world. The Illuminati controls much of the financial wealth and resources, oil, mines, and they put the little guy out of business all over the world. The Illuminati, the elite. And from my reading of this material, as you shall see, it appears they want to return to the golden age. These secret mystery school of Babylon societies, cults, lodges, temples, heads of religions, CEOs of corporations, senators, representatives, presidents, and leaders around the world wouldn't be where they are today if they weren't playing along, put in as puppets. And the ones who weren't puppets, like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and presidents in Central South America and John Kennedy, well, we know what happened to all the people who didn't go along or try to expose the truth. See, you got this battle going on. And I think with reading the Wagner the Troubadour, believe it or not, the guy who wrote plays and fantastic music like Mozart or other famous authors, and the singers and the plays that he wrote. So when you went to one of these plays, they were telling a story. They didn't have TV, they didn't have the movies, they didn't have radio. And so everybody would go and become mesmerized. Lest we forget occultism. Today we know it as symbolism, was mesmeration, hypnotizing people, propaganda, deception again. The news, they beguile, they mislead us. And people, if you're not on guard, you don't catch it. So back then, it was a similar type of thing. But when you did get initiated into the mystery schools or study the occultic religion through initiation, and you somehow get some kind of direct link with the other worldly spiritual realm, and of course you got two choices: the realm of heaven where God is, or the realm where the 1/3 of the angels were cast out. That realm. There's at least two separate realms, if we believe the Bible, that 1/3 of the angels were cast out. So there's a place where they were cast out from, then there was a place they were cast out to, and then of course we have the material plane, Earth. And it seems this celestial battle is also being played out on the earthly plane. So they apparently, as I read in one of the books when I was going through the series on Zionism and Talmudic Judaism and all that, there's a word called soul snatcher. So when they were teaching Christianity to the Jews were upset, saying you're trying to snatch the souls of the Jews. And then of course vice versa. Now they're trying to make all of we Christians not believe in Jesus or God. Nihilism, believe in nothing. They're trying to snatch the souls. Why Rabbi Marvin Antelman wrote that book, to eliminate the opate. The opate is the belief in God. When you pray, you communicate. What does it say in the Bible? When 2 or 3 or more get together in my name to pray, I shall be there. So over and over and over, you're going to hear references to this. So then you have Hyperborea, an ancient myth, apparently with some supporting archaeological evidence, ancient monuments, which was a supreme domain north of Germany, north of all that European area, up in the ice, where they had Odin and Thor, Hyperborea. And then, of course, you had Atlantis between the Americans and the European continent, which sank Atlanta. And then, of course, in the Pacific, they had Lemuria. And apparently over in the Philippine area and all that, it all submerged. And apparently there was a huge catastrophic event on planet Earth, and something caused the plates to shift, and it used to be all flat. They didn't have the mountains. So when you're reading this material, as I go along, all this stuff will come into focus. So here we go. I'm going to just get to it. The master of Bayreuth and the principal Waggoner themes. So Waggoner, Richard Waggoner, was born in Leipzig in 1813. His mother, having remarried after the death of her first husband, settled in Dresden with her children. According to his own testimony, Richard Waggoner, as a child, knew few restraints. He says, I grew up without being subject to any authority whatsoever, without any other educators than life, art, and myself. In our world, where the mania for education has gone off the deep end, we no longer receive this gift, save by chance. I lost my father while still an infant, certain that she would not be chased away. Norm slid down into my cradle and granted me this gift, which would never leave me. If indeed a gift was granted to this future prodigy, it was that of music. An intractable, strong-willed, restless, and imaginative child, young Wagner would work only when someone excited him. With enthusiasm, he thus learned Greek, Latin, mythology, and ancient history. As an adolescent, he was filled with revolutionary ideas, smothering in the bourgeois atmosphere of a Germany which had forgotten its history. Goethe was 80 years old, and decadence and mediocrity in the arts were commonplace. In music, comic opera and Italian grand opera were the rage, to the extent that even the genius of Beethoven was eclipsed. But Wagner was marked by a tragic genius. The plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, were revelations to him, as were the tragedies of Shakespeare. Reacting to everything with sensitivity and moved and impassioned by events which shook him to the very depths of his being, Wagner one day would give this overflowing of enthusiasm and lyricism in its most grandiose expression through music. Aspiring all his might to an ideal world, aspiring with all his might to an ideal world. This is what these elitists think they're doing. His unbridled energy prompted him to write plays at an early age of 15. He foresaw a day when man, delivered from the shackles of language, would express himself in a universal tongue. One evening, he confides, I heard a symphony of Beethoven. That night, I ran a fever and became ill. After I had recovered, I became a musician. Wagner, inspired by the drama of Shakespeare and exalted by the overpowering music of Beethoven, confidently picked up the wand. Got bugs out here. Capable of making the past come to life. Initiated, here we go, into the mystery of high revelation, Wagner discovered in a single instant the world of primordial energies. So here we had both Albert Pike and Helena Blavatsky talking about primordial human history. Henceforth, he held the key to poetry and to music. He then resolved to become a musician, despite some family opposition. When I thought myself to be sufficiently far along in my studies, I announced my intentions to become a musician. I had many a battle to fight, for my family was convinced that my penchant for music was only a passing fancy. I was 16 at the time, and reading Hoffman drove me to the wildest kind of mysticism. Here we go. Remember, this was the hero for Hitler. For days in a half-weakened state, I had hallucinations, during which the tonic, third, and dominant chords appeared to me, in person, revealed to me their greatest significance. Fortunately, I found a teacher, a knowledgeable musician. I gave the poor fellow a hard time. He felt obliged to explain to me that where I saw magic forms and powers, there were only intervals and chords. So here we have a connection with Wagner, apparently like Nikolai Tesla and many others, Helena Blavatsky and Albert Pike and Aleister Crowley all had masters communication with interdimensional beings, visions and sightings and hearing things and dreams. So apparently Wagner was one of these types of people, and some would call him maybe a tinge of being a psychic, like Edgar Casey or something. So who was guiding him? Therein lies the question. And you're going to see some very interesting thinking. The opera is about an impassioned tribune, dreaming of the re-establishment of the austere Roman Republic in the midst of Rome, corrupted by the papacy. So they thought Rome was corrupted by the papacy. An energetic character filled them with mighty thought, a noble heart full of love of country, at odds with a brutal and vulgar entourage, having to share his faith with only an enthusiastic and equally patriotic sister. This is Wagner. Carried for a moment to the heights of power by the masses, then struck down at the zenith of his glory by papal intrigue. Betrayed by a self-seeking nobility, banished by that same populace which had acclaimed him, and falling on the threshold of his burning house at the last tribune of Rome. So this would have been the opera is about an impassioned tribune. So a tribune was probably a leader. He had written an opera about an impassioned tribune, dreaming of the re-establishment of the austere Roman Republic in the midst of Rome corrupted by the papacy. So if I were to say this in English for 2016, we would like to have the re-establishment of the austere United States of America in the midst of Washington, D.C.'s corruption. And then going back to this tribune, an energetic character filled with mighty thought, a noble heart full of love of country, at odds with a brutal and vulgar entourage, having to share his faith with only an enthusiastic and equally patriotic sister. The threshold of the burning house of the last tribune of Rome. So he wrote a play about this tribune who had dreams of restoring the Republic. This subject was made, notes Edward Shorn, to fire the imaginations of youth already aroused by the July Revolution and the Polish insurrection. So we have all this propaganda, things going on in our world right now, demonizing the people of the Middle East, which are not only Muslims, Arabs, Islamic, some of them are Christians and Jewish, atheists and Buddhists and Hindu and Zoroastrianism. But they don't tell we the people that in the news. So Reigh was the work of youth, but of great significance. The major Wagner themes are already taking shape. The man of inspiration whom the forces of evil try to crush. The man of inspiration whom the forces of evil try to crush. The spirit of combat and of sacrifice. The cult of a hero and of the historic vision of the world. All of these themes are developed further on the works of his maturity. So he started out as 15 years old or whatever, and apparently as he moved along and thrived forward, he matured, developed his skills like I guess anybody would, actors or actresses or musicians and scientists. Constantly at odds with small-minded people, unable to understand the grandeur of his aspirations, Wagner decided to try his luck in Paris, that radiant center of glory, dazzling all Europe, in 1839, at the age of 26. So if you think about it, this is not that long ago. So when we get to 2039, which is what, 13 years from now? 16, 20, 2 years, 3 years? It's going to be 200 years ago. And remember from my previous research, in Europe, in the 1850s, thereabouts, they had established the psychic research societies. And then a little later, they established the American research societies. And I have volumes of books. We're going to look at those. into the occult, into seances and ghosts and spirits and all kinds of things. Then, of course, we have Edgar Cayce. So from 1850 to about 1840, for 100 years, right before World War II, which was started in 1939, 1940. And then all that stuff seemed to go quietly away, for the masses anyways. Just like we know President Reagan and his wife are into the occult and getting psychic readings, and the Hollywood people are all into that, and Kabbalah and all that, the stuff I've been going over. And then the themes right now in the world, like in the Super Bowl halftime shows, the Grammys, the Emmys, the Olympic openings, and CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, they have all these satanic rituals, Shiva, demonic dances and themes, which recently, a new one just blew me away. They had a grand opening for a tunnel in Europe. Switzerland? Yeah. And you won't believe the satanic show they did. Even a demon being lowered from a rope. And everybody dressed half naked, humping each other. I kid you not. And it starts out with all the workers dressed in these orange uniforms, looking like construction uniforms, but orange in the boots, all marching like robots, coming through the tunnel. And I passed it on to a friend of mine, and he said, "Man alive, this is crazy." And then last month, they made an announcement they were going to put those archways to Baal, the devil, in New York and London. And later on, everybody found out from UNESCO, from the United Nations, they're putting 1,000 of them all over the world. So one would wonder if they're trying to invoke some grand magical event. Just some kind of, what is Gnosticism, knowledge, secret mysteries, schools of Babylon, where they have information that they don't want to share with the rest of us under threat of death. They have to swear. So it does lead us to see here that Wagner was so inspired with his music and playwriting and singing that he was trying to get the word out and get the public inspired. All right, back to the book. Constantly at odds with small-minded people, unable to understand the grandeur of his aspirations, Wagner decided to try his luck in Paris, that radiant center of glory dazzling all Europe. In 1839, at the age of 26, Wagner arrived there. After numerous rebuffs, he left the capital embittered and disappointed. No one had wanted any part of Reigh, R-I-E-N-Z-I. But the musician, despite all kinds of hardships, gained from his bohemian existence an invaluable human experience. And let me tell you, from my personal experience, there's nothing like failure to help you learn how to reach success. Get to the core of your soul if you're focused on doing something. But they want people to believe in nihilism. Nothing. You are nothing. There is no God. You're going to gain nothing. Everything is useless. You may as well forget it. You're born, you die. Nihilism. That's what they want people to think. It's wrong. It's insane. But we'll get to that. For one thing, he took stock of his friendships, which turned out to be few in number. His genius was strengthened through misfortune, and where many others would have given up, he found new energy. This is Wagner, Richard Wagner. Very important. A key inspiration to Hitler. And it's all going to come out in this reading here, this video. Early in 1842, Reigh, that was a play he wrote, was accepted by the Dresden Theater. The work was an immediate success. In his Flying Dutchman, Wagner had shown himself to be an innovator, breaking as through by magic the chains of civilization which held us prisoners in a network of conventions. Communing with the collective soul of the nation by means of a distant, inexplicable affinity, Wagner felt himself to have been initiated into a great invisible community. It was then, he said, that I found my deliverance as an artist. It was then that, after a long struggle between the hope within me and the despair from without, I acquired an unshakable faith in the future of art. This revelation Wagner would find in the legend and in the myths, in verses of all ages, from the Nordic sagas to the legendary cycles of the Grail. You see where I'm going with this? As an inspired writer, artist, poet, musician, conductor, he started to focus on the Nordic sagas, mythology, the legendary cycles of the Grail, ancient history, heroes, giants. It was from this mystical source that Wagner drew his Tannhäuser and Parsifal, thereby linking up again with the ancient tradition. A popular book on the legend of Tannhäuser furnished the material for his opera. He found there the tradition concerning the contest of the singers at Wartburg Castle, and a legion of Llywelyn, the legend of Llywelyn. Got to get my reading right. So there's a legend of Llywelyn. Thurreja was the hospital landgraves of the 13th century, the meeting place of the most illustrious poet-singers. So that's what they had, these troubadours who went around with their plays and their music. And they also had illustrious poet-singers. So they communicated with each other through poetry, and they had people who would sing the poetry. Can you see it? They didn't have radio, they didn't have TV, they didn't have the movies. This is how they did it. And they would travel around to the communities, and they would have these plays, and maybe the girl would fall down and lose her lover or whatever, or two knights would be fighting in battle, and the music would go, and the poet would sing the song. And you'd get to get the whole point of the story. The mini-singers is what they called them. Mini-singers. In the middle of the green forest rises the sacred mountain of Venusberg, which, according to popular legend, was inhabited by a dangerous goddess. Once she had been a beneficent divinity, bringing with her joy, this is one of the stories, and abundance. But then Christianity came, banishing her, cursing her, and forcing her to take refuge within the bowels of the earth. So Christianity came like the enemy to this benefit divinity, a goddess. So that would be the popular legend. Bear with me. Banishing her, cursing her, forcing her to take refuge within the bowels of the earth. Her name then became assimilated to that of Venus, the goddess of sensual pleasure. She ensnared knights by means of her charms, holding them prisoner in her magic castle. Tannhäuser, the knight poet, wanted to see the great marvel. So you had a knight who was also a poet, Tannhäuser, and for several years was Venus's spouse. But then he repented and made amends. Wagner uses this naive theme as a pretext to extol the pure courtly love sung by the troubadours and to condemn sensual love, which identifies with the things of this world. Here we go, we're getting into cosmology again. They're saying sensual love is bad, and the people who identify with the thing of this world, materialism. They want to go back towards some kind of puritanism. Thus takes shape a whole mythical fresco, which situates Wagner very close to medieval poetry, a good part of which is imbued with Cathar ideology. So the Cathars were the followers of the that other religion. I'll think of the name in a minute. When Lohengrin begins the legend in a strict sense that reaches back to the ultimate source of legend, the cycle and adventure of the Holy Grail. Here we go. The composition of Tannhauser had given Wagner a feeling of liberation, of Cartharism, the Cathar religion, which was at opposition to the Roman Church, and which, when the Roman Church went to the southern France to destroy them, mass murdered everybody, no matter if they were Cathars, Christians, whatever. And the saying back then was, kill them all, men, women, and children, and let God sort them out. He will recognize his own. This is what we're dealing with, which had swept him away to a vision far beyond earthly things. It was in this realm that Lohengrin, the Knight of the Holy Grail, will try to conquer. So just like sequels to shows we watch now, Star Trek or other movies, Indiana Jones, there were many sequels, The Lord of the Rings. So Wagner had sequels to his plays. He was telling a story. And again, what I'm trying to point out, and it's going to come to this, somehow Hitler became aware, went to one of the plays, and like Wagner, when he listened to Beethoven and got ill and woke up a musician, and apparently gained some kind of celestial insight into his pursuits, this whole thing changed Hitler's mind too, listening to these plays by Wagner. The prelude of Wagner's Lohengrin, through the eclectic harmonies of the Holy Grail, carries us off with a celestial abode. Carries us off to a celestial abode. The initiate of Mont Salvant is deep in prayer. A legion of angels, brings into a gathering of the knights the cup of the Holy Grail. The sacred vessel has been entrusted to the care of a pure who watches over it. So some people are called a pure, I guess. So moving on, and I'm not reading everything, I'm just reading my highlighted portions. In a far-off, inaccessible land, he says, there is, as though suspended between heaven and earth, a castle called Mont Salvant. There is a luminous temple which shines there, and there is nothing in all the world to equal it. Thus enraptured, the radiant stranger reveals the mystery of the Holy Grail, brought by the angels to the pure, which gives to its initiates, here we go with the initiations, again initiates, faith, valor, and fortitude. Now then, all of you, he exclaims boldly, hear my answer. I am the messenger of the Holy Grail. My father, Piersver, wears its crown. I, Lohengrin, am its knight. The revelation finished, Lohengrin must leave. So he's coming to save this damsel in distress. Kings, nobles, and lovely Ilsa all try to keep him from going, but their attempts are in vain. His destiny beckons. The Holy Grail summons its messenger, and the swan has reappeared on the river, towing its frail skiff. Upon seeing Lohengrin leave, Elsa swoons and gives up her spirit. So I guess she swoons and dies. Such is the drama of ideal love, clothed in the splendor remnant of the knightly myth, whose profundity speaks for itself. It is not Lohengrin's destiny, that of a hero, the prophet and the genius of the world, so great in knowledge, but so small in faith. An apprehensive psychic, Elsa, the human soul, has a presentiment of its idea in a dream. One day he comes and she asks him, Who are you? Where do you come from? Here I am. What more do you need? He replies, give me proof of who you are. Then he vanishes and returns to his solitude. Just trying to give us a gist here of the thinking. It makes sense when you move on. So let us briefly consider these works. With Parsifal, Wagner continues to amplify the Christian esotericism by returning to the most ancient myths. By having us present at the mysteries of the Grail, the composer lets us into the sanctuary by the means of the key of pure gold, which opens all doors, the key to infinite knowledge. There we go. The key to infinite knowledge. Remember, the people are into yoga, they're into initiation, giving up all their worldly dreams or material thoughts and focusing on this cosmic realm. And apparently, as we've talked about in previous videos recently that I made, and these other books, Helena Blavatsky, The Secret Doctrine, and Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike, and the psychic research material, and that their philosophy is they would like to stop the births of children because they feel when a child is born, another soul comes into the child, thus enslaving the soul. They say we should all lust for the other realm whence we came. And this earthly existence is like a prison. And they want to end our suffering and release us, which I suppose they're going to have to kill us. Just putting two and two together, my opinion. Parsifal is unaware of the meaning of the Holy Grail. He does not know that the emerald cup is that in which Jesus celebrated the Last Supper, in which Joseph of Arimathea collected the blood of Christ. The order of the Knights of the Holy Grail were founded by the noble Trunnion to preserve the marvelous treasure. His son Armaphatus succeeded him, but evil stalked him in the form of a magician. Klingzor, creator of the castle of perdition, an evil apparition erected against the fortress of God. An evil apparition erected against the fortress of God. Klingzor made Armiphis fall by sending him a woman of irresistible beauty. Seizing a lance intended to kill him, Klingzor wounded Armaphortus in the side. Ever since, the king had been afflicted with an incurable malady. So the evil wanted to kill the good. But Parsifal, this is the play that Wagner wrote, is to replace Amfortas as king of this spiritual realm. The sorceress called forth by Klingzor is named Kundry. Sorceress is named Kundry. Just as Parsifal was about to yield to her beauty, the youth regains possession of himself. In a supreme effort, he frees himself from her embraces. This is the play now. Can you see him? The beauty, she mesmerizes him, he's about to fall, and then he shakes himself and realizes and gains his wits and tries to back away. My interpretation. He feels in his heart a burning sensation. Something like that felt by Armfortas, the Fisher King, for sensual pleasure is the mother of pain. Furious at having failed, Klingzor appears in the midst of his intended victims and throws the holy lance, the lance that pierced Jesus' side, the same which pierced the side of the Savior, at this fool who would dare to defy him. But the lance, recognizing one pure in heart, stops in mid-air. Immediately the magician in the castle, who are but diabolical illusions, come crashing down in a mighty din. Wow. So he threw the lance, the evil magician, to kill Parsifal. And the lance itself recognized Parsifal as one of its own and stops in midair. Can you see how this might have a powerful impact on people and thinking? So again, I'm skipping a couple pages here, moving on. I'm trying to make a point here, and I think it'll unfold itself. Breathing new life into the ancient heroic legend of the Germans, Wagner brought together this vast ensemble in 4 succeeding Teblichs. So I guess he had 4 plays: the Rheingold, the Valkyrie, Siegfried, and the Twilight of the Gods. The mythical elements of this epic are drawn from the Scandinavian sagas. Scandinavia, North area. It is through them alone that we know the legend of the Germans. The two peoples had in common with the same deities, here we go, belonging to the great family of the Aryan gods. Edward Shore explains the history of this people. In their long voyage through the forest of Scythia and across the seas of the north, they lost that ray of light which comes to them from the heavens of Upper Asia, and by whose virtue they shone so resplendently in India, Persia, and Greece, and that brilliant aurora of mankind. Moody, crude, and barbarous, these gods came to us from Iceland, by the way of Edda, that chaotic cosmology, that sinister limbo of a mythology in its early stages. Interestingly enough, to some current events in the last 100 years, Richard Byrd, the explorer, military commander, Admiral Byrd, after World War I and World War II era, he went to the North Pole and then he went to the South Pole. And there's a lot of material about the hollow earth, or these beings that live under the surface, ancient societies, and also in Tibet, Shambhala, the Himalayan mountains, and the remnants, apparently remnants, you know, the survivors, before the great cataclysm on Earth when everything was flooded or the mountains turned upside down and everything else. With this prior civilization, with giants like Steve Quayle in his book, The Giants. You can go online and see all the pictures of the skulls. Skulls the size of small washing machines and stuff. Elongated skulls. And here we go back to the UFOs, aliens, crop circles. Everything starts to come full circle again. But apparently, in the Nordic area, where it was this ancient civilization, and the myths and mysteries and stories, and Wagner with his plays was bringing him back alive. And about this world they wanted to bring back, the return of the Golden Age. You see the thinking? And this is what part of the mystery school of Babylon, and when we read Morals and Dogma again, or Helena Blavatsky again, we got to remember this stuff. Or the teaching of the Adept in the Rosicrucian book. We got to remember this stuff. Somebody has plans to bring back this return to a golden age, and they're pretty clear about it, and we'll see it in this material, that their idea is for the populace, the peoples, be happy slaves so that these elitists can build their utopia. They make no bones about that. And we need to think about that. Moving on here. Wotan, the Northern Zeus god of combat and symbol of masculine courage, reigned over this divine world with his 9 daughters. This is part of the old mythology. The Valkyries, galloping through the storm, gathering up the souls of the warriors fallen in the fields of battle. So that's another thing these people like. They like battles. So their ideal world, let's say they do divide the world into 10 sections, which you can find maps on the internet, this new plan for the New World Order. And will they have people like World War I and World War II, an endless battle going on the planet with different groups fighting each other, while these elitists think that they're like gods and get to watch? And tell us humans that we should strive to serve our masters and be brave and courageous and plunge forward and die in battle is the glory for the soul. Is that what they would have us believe? And look at the Hunger Games movie. Aren't they telling us that? The gods are forever at war with the races of the giants and the dwarfs, constituting the two poles of humanity. We find here an idea exploited by the theoreticians of the North. We see in the pantheism of German mythology an appeal to the cosmic forces of race. We know how this realm of gods will end, perishing in the flames of a world in revolt and governed by men. It is this that echoes Nietzsche's God is dead. Nihilism. So there was another famous person back then, Nietzsche, and he wanted to get the word out that God is dead. Nihilism. So what I did is I went online to my regular Yahoo image site, and I looked up nihilism. Now I keep saying, like you can find billboards now that say freedom from religion. I'm trying to make a point here. Or that logo I've shown before, faith no more. And then of course the gay agenda with all its even more bizarre ramifications like transgenderism, all kinds of different sexual deviancies. Humans they can create, and they're passing laws that you can't discriminate between these people or misidentify their gender repeatedly, intentionally. And they're even now, the Salon.com, another magazine, is trying to, I went on the internet and I printed these out, say that even pedophiliers, people who admit their propensity to be attracted to little children, they were born that way, and we shouldn't disparage them and just treat them like they're ill or something, or we have to understand, and that I guess they have rights too, if the child, I guess, agrees with the sexual exploits of these pedophilias. And we know from the Talmudic Jewish book, they can have children as 3-year-olds. So there's something, again, more sinister as this. And Nietzsche's God is dead, trying to promote to the world nihilism. And I'm saying there's a whole lot of other things being promoted to the world: propaganda, deception, beguilement. Beguilement, of course, they lead you that something's good. Go this way, come this way, come this way. Like Pinocchio. And when he gets onto the island, it's like a big circus. Cotton candy, the rides, the whole thing. And then they shuffle him to the back and he winds up on a slave ship. Beguilement. So right now in the world we have beguilement, we have deception. They're demonizing the Arabs. They're controlling the populace with the many poor people with welfare checks and food stamps and other benefits. Temporarily. Right now in Georgia they're already turning off the food stamps, and people are already, one guy's threatening Donald Trump with death if they cut off the food stamps. You can look this up on the internet. So they have everybody on the hook right now. And when they do, for whatever reason, they'll say they ran out of money and they have to cut everybody off of their checks and their food stamps and something that's sustaining them right now. So they can turn the dial anytime they want to make this world upside down. So what I did is I made a video. I went up on Yahoo image site and put in occult nihilism, or nihilism, and then I put the videos together and a little bit of drum beat music, and I'm going to play it right now. It is not what I believe. I think it's part of the grand deception, and a lot of people out there, if you talk to them, they believe in nihilism. They don't want to talk about any of this. They will physically, mentally shut down, get angry at you if you try to talk about this stuff. So I just thought I might prove this point by this artwork that is out there. Like the billboards that say freedom from religion, and the websites, and the propaganda, and the gay agenda, and the biodiversity, and the sustainability, and the global warming, and all the other threats and fears, stock market crashing, because of those evil capitalists. Or the homosexuality and all this other stuff promoted by those evil Democrats. They're using the two sides, and they use it as a catalyst, and then they can push a button and have everybody viciously fighting each other, which apparently is what I think they want. So look at this video I made, and then I'm going to get back to this book. In bold synthesis, Wagner links the heroic tradition of the Germans, grouped about the person of the blonde Siegfried, the vanquisher of the dragon Fafnir, with the myth of the Scandinavian god led by Wotan. Against this backdrop, Siegfried and the eternal woman, represented by Brunhilde, stands out as an exceptional personage. In the theurgy dramatized in this work, we witness the drama of the heroes born of the divine logos. So you heard that word logos in Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, dragging down the gods themselves into the catastrophe. This is the first time that an attempt was made to put this mythology on a modern stage. Cut short by Christianity, modern science alone has retrieved it from darkness. My book's falling all apart. The Rheingold, another play, a prelude to the 3 days comprised by the Valkyries, Siegfried, and the Twilight of the Gods, has in its main subject the battle waged by divine entities against their enemies, the dwarfs and the giants, united by the tragic bondage of the gold entrusted to the care of the water spirits, there we go, of the Rhine, water spirits of the Rhine River. In this struggle for the magic ring, remember the movie The Lord of the Rings, everything is connected. The sources of evil power, the gods emerge adorned with the luminous glory of the victors. The Valkyries see men delivered from their original fear and taking on sinister powers under the repulsive dwarf Alberich. The gods come down among men in order to help them and teach them wisdom. Brunhilde, the young and proud daughter of Wotan, is the main character in this drama. Siegfried, the story of an ideal Germanic hero, opens the second day. Got a bug on me here. A paragon of virtues, the young man is utterly fearless. Siegfried. A paragon of virtue, the young man is utterly fearless, challenging the forces of evil. He kills the dragon. Here we got the dragon, the serpent. A recurring theme throughout history. Finnar taking possession of the famous magic ring. Through Brunhilde, the hero discovers love. But it is the end of the supremacy of the gods. In yielding to earthly passion, here we go, the Valkyrie has destroyed the defenses of the fortress of Valhalla. She has unknotted the riddle of the runes. That would be those little stones with engravings on them, runes. Twilight of the gods, come forth from the abyss. Night of nothingness, enshrown the world. Reading more from my torn pages. All right, here we go. It gets a little bit there. Fascinated by the mad visionary and prophet Hitler, Adolf Hitler, who saw it as a sequel to a Nazi revelation. That would be that guy Nazi who promoted nihilism. Believe in nothing, God is dead. In the light of the philosophical interpretation of the work, we shall see what influences the Master of Bayreuth exercised over Hitler while the latter was still an adolescent. He was eventually exalted to the point of believing himself to be a demigod concentrated by the highest destinies. Now this is concerning, getting back to current events. Who is it going to be? So they say there's an Antichrist coming. Who is going to be this next guy like Hitler, who believing in himself to be a demigod, I guess a human that is represented on earth as a god, consecrated to the highest destinies? Some people say it's Obama. Some people say it's the Pope. Some people say it's a young prince over there in London. Some people say it's many people. But we all have to pay attention because some player like this is supposed to come on the world stage. And again, remembering all this stuff just might be beneficial. Moving on here. One can easily assimilate, in the light of what we know, Walter and Wolfram, one belonging to the Church of the Cathars, and the other to the Order of the Temple. Remember, these now are called the Freemasons and the Illuminati. And we got the other players, the Zionists and the Jesuits and the Kabbalists, and just endless groups of these things, including the United Nations is controlled by this mystery school of Babylon cultism. And they are the ones promoting the gay agenda and all this other new age material. People getting into yoga and trying to get everybody to believe that materialism is evil. And that we're prisoners in these bodies and we need to be released. And nothing matters. Nihilism is it. And the other, the Order of the Temple, both spoke of the same language, that of the grail of or pure blood. There is a fact which tends to confirm this Catharism-Templarism association. So remember, when I'm reading this is only a conversation. Just give us a little stuff, something to ponder. We shall mention one more historical fact, which will help the readers see that the Manichaeism, that's what a word I was trying to remember earlier, which preceded Catharism, the Cathars, because there was a prophet called Manichaeism, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong, and one person did send me the correct pronunciation. Rosicrucianism, connection with the National Socialism. I keep saying it's all connected. And I'm saying it's connected with the secret doctrine, Rosicrucian, Freemasonry, Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. And if I keep making these videos and people keep watching them, and you'll see the common denominators. That's what I'm trying to get at with these, 26 hours I've produced of this stuff in the last 12 videos? It's a lot of work, but I'm picking up on this stuff. And I run across sentences like this that confirm everything. We shall mention one more historic fact, that which will help the readers see that Manichaeism, Catharism, Rosicrucianism connected with National Socialism. Several Carmelite brothers have left their names engraved in the decadent Gothic script in a staircase which has, for this reason, been named the Staircase of Graffiti. Page 144. Distinguished by the brother Goyut, who adds to his signature in order to distinguish it from the other graffiti, the heraldic rose, the heraldic rose overlaid with the swastika. So the rose is one of the symbols overlaid on a cross, is a symbol for the Rosicrucians, and apparently it's also another symbol for the National Socialism or this mystery school of Babylon cult. The heraldic rose overlaid on a swastika. Symbols are everything. This is the same brother Goyut who wrote the famous Cathar Bible, which cannot find enough praise for the Order of the Temple, i.e. the Freemasons, Illuminati, and all these other mystery school, witchcraft covens, Illuminati, everything. Knights of Malta, Columbus, Club of Rome, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger groups. And while they're vilifying all other religious orders, so it says here. Let us note that the romance of Lancelot, in Latin, Lancelot means servant of God, is closely related to the Grail romances. Arthur, King of Brittany, King Arthur, is related to the old Aryan conqueror in mythological times, and the principal elements of the myth would seem to be of an Eastern origin. One is struck by several analogies. For example, the yearly voyage of the sun through the 12 signs of the zodiac, here we go again, and a renewing of life represented by the sign of the water bearer suggests the idea of the quest of the Grail. undertaken by the Knights of the Round Table. The 12 signs of the zodiac being the worshippers of the sun, who set out on the same quest as the sun himself. So think about the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill and the sun in the behind the eye. The all-seeing eye symbol everywhere. American Idol, NFL, news stations. To come back to Catholicism and Albigensianism, it should be remembered that during the second half of the 12th century, Catholic doctrine marched triumphantly across the civilized world. So back during the 12th century, Catholicism was on the rise. Knighthood was in flower, and the Aquarian knights were equal at home in the Holy Land, and the Tripolitia, which was the Romantic province. The moral decay of the church contributed considerably to this anti-Pontific movement in Aquitania. So the anti-pope, because of the moral decay of the church even had a bunch of bordillos, and one pope had a beautiful mistress he took around with him. And you could get saved from your sins if you paid the pope. I've read a lot of that material. When an Albigensian missionary preached, so when you got one of these Cathars or Albigensian missionary preached, the crowds came running and listened. With him in fever, but were a Roman priest to speak, he was asked ironically how he dared spread the word of God. St. Bernard of Chiverix could say of the Cathars, "There are certainly no more Christian sermons than theirs, and their ways were pure." At this time, Aquitania was solidly on the side of Catholicism. In the mighty battles shaping up between the main forces of the West and the ecclesiastical tyranny of those times, so 12th century, it was a bunch of killing going on and warring between the Roman Catholic Church and these Albigensians, Templars, Gobelines made common cause against the enemy. The work of Wagner, Richard Wagner again, the composer, indeed could be for us the vision of the last troubadour, the person going around making these plays, storytelling to the people, because they didn't have a radio, TV, movies, and all that. Looking down from on high upon the unconscious obtruseness. Three religious elements, stand out in Tristan. The old Druidic element in King Mark, son of Meachan, the Orthodox belief in King Mark, son of Meachan, the Orthodox belief inclining towards Albigensian, personified by the blonde Isolde, accepting with hesitation the repugnance of Druidic element. Tristan, that is to say, Albigensian proselytizing. You say this word, right where my finger is. I just wing it. But we get the point. As concerns the first element, let us recall that Languedoc was with Armagnac, which explains the legend of Lancelot, the chosen land of the Druids, the land where the mixture of Celts and Aquitanians had produced a race of pure and unselfish men of blue eyes and brown hair. Thus, the legend of King Arthur becomes fused with those of the troubadours. Proofs are not lacking on this subject. One can find them in Schmidt's History of the Cathars and the Albigenses. Page 146. I'm just reading my highlighted portions. The latter were the masters or fathers of the apostles called Jesus Christ. Let us be careful not to forget that the Holy Grail, as Francis Rolt Wielder, mystic gleam from the Holy Grail, has noted, is the symbol of the highest emotion of Christianity. The quest for the Grail is a symbol of Christian aspiration. At the summit of its desire, the cross is the symbol of obedience, and the Holy Grail is the symbol of Christian freedom. Tradition has it that the first vision of the Grail was granted to the apostles by Christ himself in the course of his initiatory teaching during the period between his resurrection and his ascension. So when he rose from the dead and before he left the planet, he initiated them into these secrets. This explains why we find elements of the first period of Christianity, and even we should not hesitate to say pre-Christian, that is to say Gnostic mixed in with the legend of the bard Merlin the magician, the secrets of early Druidism, and the earthly knighthood of King Arthur, in the cycle of the adventures of the Holy Grail. It all fits together. Now remember, on the Freemasonries, and people join the Freemasons, the Masons, and they get to be the first three degrees, 1, 2, 3, and threading under death not to divulge the secret. And as we read in the Night of the Brazen Serpent, when they learn this stuff, and I'm going to go over some more of the degrees and see what other stuff is in Morals and Dogma, and read more from Helena Blavatsky, and what more interesting stuff is in there, and the Rosicrucian, and other things, Alice Bailey or Annie Besant in the Mysticism, published by, the book I have, I think, by Annie Besant or Alice Bailey, by Lucifer Publishing Trust Company. I have that, I show that. And we're going to keep on looking at this, and then, of course, the Tau, or the Ankh, or the across the T with the circle on top. Apparently, the T represents divine, and the circle is a snake. So apparently, there's something to do with the serpent reptilian creatures again. The common denominators keep coming around. The divine is accessible, one might say, to the initiate. It says it here. The divine is accessible, one might say, to the initiate. The profane at the material level, that would be us, we're profane, because we're not one of the initiates. And the lyric at the level of the musical thought. So words and music are powerful tools for the magicians. Just call it some kind of spiritual, psychic mesmerization or control over people. They use those symbols. We see them all the time on the TV programming. So that was 146. 147. I guess I'm going to have to stop here in a minute and continue tomorrow because it appears like it's dropping a little rain. The vassalage of gold. Immortality expressed in the sublime measures of the Rhine gold. The degeneration of the peoples of the West. And an old theme, as we have seen, is due to the influence of the East and the vices of the priest-ridden religion, in contrast to the pures, who are the Cathars and the Templars. Lastly, the regeneration of man through vegetarianism. A lot of people are into that now. The principle of which Hitler subscribed during his entire life. That's interesting. A lot of people out there who are vegetarians might find it interesting to know that Hitler subscribed to that his entire life. And remember, he studied the occult. He spent a lot of time in the library through my previous studies when he was young, studying these ancient myths and occults, and through art considered as the sole mediator between man and God. All right, it's Tuesday, June 7th, 2016, and I'm continuing the video on this book, The Third Rite and the Occult. It's just an interesting conversation. Might help connect some dots on some questions we have about the reality we live in these days. Strange things going on. here we go. Wagner, the popular composer, playwright, and apparently one of Hitler's inspirations, heroes, and motivations behind what Hitler got into. National Socialism. So Wagner, like the troubadours of Aquitania, and the troubadours, I'll repeat it again, back then, 200 years ago, they didn't have TVs, radios, movies, etc. They had these groups that went around like operas, and they had singers who would sing poetry, the words, and of course the actors on the stage. So they would tell a story and make it full of emotion with the music and everything. Those were troubadours. Wanted his work to be essentially esoteric. So we got this Wagner, the troubadour, Hitler's hero, wanted his work to be essentially esoteric. Like the occult. We can mention Wolfram's Watcher leader, one of which was singled out for the immortalization. Without forgetting, however, that Manichaeism of this same Wolfram, Manichaeism is a philosophy from some guy named Mani who was like a prophet, hence Manichaeism. Then later on came the Cathars into these esoteric occult philosophies, like the Helena Blavatskys and the Theosophist Society, or Albert Pike's book, Morals and Dogma, with this cosmology. And of course, Aleister Crowley and his cosmology, Do As Thou Will, the Book of the Law. Like the Persians sang of a stone falling from heaven. They sang of a stone falling from heaven. The origin of this stone is assuredly the same as that of the East. It is attributed, get this, to Lucifer fall from his revolt. Lucifer, literally the light-bearing angel. When the rebellious angel was thrown into the abyss, an emerald from his crown fell to earth. The emerald, according to the symbolism of precious stones, is the stone of prophecy. According to the legend, it is from this gem, cut in the shape of a vase with 144 facets, the square of 12 being the number of fulfillment or of plenitude, that the Grail was created, for all of this concerns the same object. This helps to explain why the more a country becomes civilized, the more its impressions of the world, as it once may have been, its native myths become blurred. So the native myths and stories become blurred, and these people, like Wagner and the philosophy that Hitler followed, were trying to resurrect the ancient history. The wild stories, mythology, the giants, the entities, the greatness. Wagner wanted to bring back to life this bygone age. With this in mind, his scenes take place in an enchanted forest. He wanted to make the public think and force it to link up with the past. He wanted to make the public think and link up with the past. Look at the movies that have been coming out. That, like the movie Thor and all these other interesting movies. And of course the ones that are trying to see us a kind of a past. Hunger Games, Divergent. Many of the movies are playing these superhero types of the ancient past. Yes? Everything in Wagner had its purpose, and here the work affronts eternity. For this composer to deliberately brush legend aside is to ignore the most essential of man's knowledge. So they're still doing this stuff with Hollywood in the United States, and I'm sure all over the world, including other kinds of propaganda, the Hegelian dialectic, causing things like 9/11, blaming it on Arabs with box cutters, overthrowing all the countries in the Middle East. There is a grand plan. Cosmically inspired by this Lucifer who fell from heaven? I don't know. But there is a plan, and it involves the Freemasonic lodges, the Satanism organization, Luciferic organizations, the United Nations, UNESCO putting 1,000 temples of Baal, archways of Baal, all over the world. The grand opening of that tunnel in Switzerland with that crazy satanic show. The statue of the devil Baal, they were trying to put it in the state building in Oklahoma, and then they had a grand opening in Detroit. And those people all showed up for celebration, and they looked like freaks. All dressed up like demons. I kid you not. And then, of course, the gay parades, the recent one in Israel, Tel Aviv. Borderlining on insanity. If you look at the people, and one guy is half naked, and he's on the stage, and he's thrusting his whole body back naked, and another guy has his hand on his stomach, and you look at the pictures, it's just bizarre. Crazy world. So moving on to page 148. If we have taken into account all available information on the subject, the fact remains that this poetic work of the troubadours were systematically destroyed and carried off to enrich the Vatican's secret library. Ha! So these troubadours, 1840, 1850, no TV, no radio, no movies, and they were going around doing these operas in these plays, and they were telling a story, trying to resurrect ancient thinking, history, to the common peoples. Bring back the old age. And the Vatican, I guess, confiscated all they could, destroyed all they could also. So we know we got these different opposition groups, but as the Pope recently announced in a video he put on YouTube, or I saw on YouTube, a message to all the other church leaders throughout the world: we need to unite now that there's no reason for us to be separate any longer. So has the Vatican joined the Luciferian camp? It appears so. Now remember, the current Pope Francis is the leader of the Jesuits, and those were the enforcer, the military, the assassin arm of the church. Why would the other Pope, Ratzinger, step down and hand the throne over to the general military arm, the Black Pope, Francis, unless they were preparing for a war? Going back to Wagner, but for Wagner, who idealized the triumph of the Spirit and salvation for all, there is not a contest between good and evil, but a veritable schism which will be filled up by the rule of God. We find ourselves here before a basic Manichaeism, transcended by a superior world. Transcended by a superior world. Is this what these people think who are bringing us this new age and new world order? And have a philosophy, the ends justify the means. So to bring about this world, would they, like the USA Georgia Guidestones say, reduce the world population to 500 million, kill 6 billion to bring this about? Just using my brain thinking. It says it right here, transcended by a superior world, with the monuments and the evidence is obvious for anybody who wants to look at it. And apparently, some kind of interdimensional phase shifting is going on Earth right now with something called the Mandela effect. Could be a byproduct of CERN, the collider, which apparently had caused ripples in the Earth all over the planet when they turned it on. Earthquake seismic meters detected it. So can they change our reality? Are they intentionally? Or did they have an accident? The heavy metals sprayed in the sky, HAARP transmitters, microwave, all this stuff. What can it do? Have they discovered some things that it can do? All through this Cathar and Templar legend, the goal remains ever in sight, an establishing of an imperial Messiah, whom the Templars thought they had indeed found in Frederick II, Hohenstaufen, until he was struck down by the church, which had uncovered his plans. So back here in 1850, 1840, they were trying to install a worldwide Messiah. Has that changed now? It appears not. The merging of the occult forces, here we go, magic, witchcraft, took place in the south of Anquitina, that old land of the Druids. A little windy out here today. The latter definitely left behind them evidence of their having once been there, were this only their spiritual impact upon the region. In fact, these men did not come to teach a religion, but a philosophical outlook of the world, a Weltanschauung, as the Germans would say. At the time of their arrival in Gaul, the Druids brought with them the Gamma Cross to oppose the nascent materialism, which they detested. So this new age, new world order, these people detest nascent materialism. It is not surprising that it is in the Pyrenees, a region much frequented by the Celts, that we find the largest number of ancient gamedia. So I suppose I'll have to look this up and get the pictures. Without getting into the study of gamedion, we note that this emblem disappears altogether at certain times in our history, only to reappear with renewed vigor. Interestingly enough, we find these symbols in the Rosicrucian material, the Secret Doctrine, Theosophy, published by the material, the New Age, at the Lucifer Publishing Company, and the Freemason Morals and Dogma. You can see the symbols in the shields of a lot of the, you know, the symbols for like the Rothschild family shields, family crests. There we go. You find these symbols. So back to the book. It was unknown in ancient Rome at the very time when it was thriving in northeastern Europe. When the Roman Empire collapsed, it was the swastika which marched victoriously across the ancient world, as did the Celtic cross, or the circle barred with a cross. Likewise, when the Templars joined forces with the Cathars in the Order of the Holy Grail, it was agreed that in all the place of the insignia of the temple, which was a cross, all concerned would adopt henceforth the symbolic signs of the dove, the Celtic cross, and the swastika. So where do we see the dove all the time? The Celtic cross, and of course the Maltese cross, the swastika. It would appear that symbols, even when they disappear momentarily, continue to live in the subconscious of the peoples who have been their promoters. This is true in the case of the swastika, an emblem which reappeared with the violence first in the Thule Society and then in the National Socialism. We can therefore consider Richard Wagner as having been sort of a catalyzer in the resurgence of this sacred symbol called the Gamma Cross. Indeed, the works of the master of Bayreuth gave it the impetus necessary for its resurgence with all its strength of old. Remember, when we talk a lot about occult, we're talking about magic. And we're talking about magic, we're talking about vibrations and words and symbols and images on the human beings. They mean something, they do something. Like the amulets that people carry to bless them or protect them. And of course, King Solomon of Jerusalem, King Solomon's temple, which the Zionist Jews are fervently bent on rebuilding, and are rebuilding it now. But he had a magic six-pointed ring, which could call forth demons, apparently. People in another dimension that cast out angels, maybe from heaven, who are in cahoots with these people, and they're bent on destroying God's kingdom. So the story seems to go. The only interpreter who has really fathomed the meaning of Wagner's works, Gildo von List, sees the swastika, the symbol of eternal future, as well as the sign of Aryan belief. The Gamma Cross in this domain cannot fool us. The occult currents of history are stronger than our powers of reason. They reveal themselves at certain times only to the initiate or to those who seek. We can only deplore the gulf which separates the Middle Ages from the 18th century. You've got a separation here about 500 years. This was the worst of gulfs, for the medieval Catholic Church had sacked and destroyed entire treasures of knowledge, learning, and wisdom through the most crass ignorance. It was easy for ignorance to replace this entire edifice by the vision of hell, thereby turning back man's spiritual evolution for centuries to come and encourage the birth of the shameful disease of history, the last of which was Nazism. So I'm a bit perplexed, which is worst? Talmudic Zionism in this newly created state of Israel and Palestine territory, murdering all of the citizens there, whether they're Arabs or whatever they are. Many of them are not Muslim or Islam. And of course, using 911 as a pretext to overthrow all the other countries and carpet bomb and mass murder those people. So that's evil number one. Then the church, as we're reading here, the Catholic Church, and I grew up Catholic, the Crusades, 8 of them, going off over to the Middle East, slaughtering so many people in the castles and the cities, the blood was knee-deep. John Robinson, Dungeon, Fire, and Sword, his books. And so you got and then the Nazis, or these National Socialists, Odin, Thor, Isis, Osiris, Horus, the all-seeing eye on the U.S. dollar bill, Lucifer, Theosophy with the Luciferian doctrine, secret doctrine, cosmology. So which is worse, the Zionists, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Vatican? Or are they all in cahoots together? Which I suspect is probably the truth, as the current Pope Francis, who had in a video you can find on the YouTube, he is inviting all the churches to unite because there's no reason to be apart any longer. So I'm thinking, what's he talking about? Has everybody agreed to join the Luciferic doctrine? With the elites running the world, creating a perfect world for them, and all of the little people, the masses, 90%, 98% of the population, be obedient servants, and as the Bible says, if you don't take the mark of the beast, you won't be able to buy or sell, and I'm sure that includes receiving your Social Security check, your pension, or anything else in society. This is right out of the Twilight Zone, or right out of a Hunger Games movie. Moving on with this book here, I recall he painted a delirious future for himself and the German people. He spoke to me of a mandate, this is Hitler, which the people would one day give to him to lead them out of servitude and raise them up to freedom. Moving on, Hitler told Madame Wagner about his Renzi experience, finished with the observation, "It was there that it all began." So here's Hitler watching one of Wagner's, Richard Wagner's plays with the music and the singers singing poetry and the actors and the background scenes. And Hitler says it was there that it all began. So if it was that Wagner, by the power of his musical sorcery and his gift for invoking the past, aroused in young Hitler an emotion so intense that it would be with him forever. And we know they are doing this to the young people today, even in the school system, the cartoons, everywhere, they're being mind controlled and programmed. And these people are growing up with that mindset, not with the mindset that I grew up with. And it's intentional. There's no doubt about that. The master of Bayreuth had awakened the adolescents to mysterious destructive forces which shook his entire being and which were to turn the world upside down. Like Reigh, Hitler saw himself as a prophet and tribune of the masses, preaching a new conception of the world and of men. In Mein Kampf, he would write, "The force which has set in motion the great avalanches of history, whether in the domain of politics or religion, has from time immemorial been one thing only, the magic power of words." I keep saying it. Only a storm of fiery passion can change the destiny of nations. But the only person who can unleash the passion is he who carries it within himself. So when you get initiated into the mysteries and you connect to the higher domain, are you connecting to God and Jesus' domain, where all of the angels were, apparently, and where 1/3 of the angels were cast out? Or are you communicating to the domain where all those angels are in some kind of Hades? Is Earth that domain? In Wagner's works, it was the initiate, the demiurge, whose Wattenschwasch, built on the theories of the harmonies of the world, seduced Hitler. Kubatz noted that as far back as 1906, his friend was drawn to the world of the German legends on which the Ring was based. So we're thinking about Theosophy, we're thinking about Helena Blavatsky, Albert Pike, all that stuff in his book. The Knight of the Brazen Serpent, the Rosicrucian, the teacher shows the initiate. The dots are connected. He thought about unceasingly, and he felt himself made for it. He believed himself to be a hero of Germanic antiquity, a life full of daring exploits, which would lead him to paradise of Valhalla, where he would become one of the demigods whom he worshipped. This romantic aspect of Adolf Hitler is important for, during his, my book's falling apart here, entire life, he believed in the Germanic world. It was for him almost a religion. Hitler was intimately acquainted with Wagner's works. Often he went whistling their themes. Nothing could have kept him away from the Bayreuth Festival, which he followed each year with keen interest. Imbued with Wagner myths, Hitler reflected on all these symbols. Some more words here. Esoteric philosophy, meaning which was inaccessible to the masses. In order to grasp properly the mystical and sacred which history associated with Wagner's works, we must remember that to him the Bayreuth spectacle had an esoteric philosophy, meaning which was inaccessible to the masses. So they don't tell the masses what this New Age is really all about. Why they're destroying all those countries in the Middle East. What's going on with CERN, the collider, apparently, possibly, causing ripples in the time-space continuum. Like out of a sci-fi movie. But with the things seemingly changing right now, you can find this on YouTube. It's a little bizarre. Apparently, when they powered up CERN the last time, it sent ripples around the world. They were measured on the earthquake seismology machines. Ripples around the whole planet. Can you imagine? An electromagnetic machine changing the magnetic field. It's almost like changing the channel on a TV. Can they change history? Is time travel possible, like H.G. Wells wrote, The Time Machine? And so much other evidence, the Philadelphia experiment. The tradition of the Olympic Games has gone on for almost 1,000 years. All right, moving on. 2 more pages. The Party Congress answers the same need. That is why for hundreds of years to come, men will come from everywhere in the world to renew themselves, once a year in the marvelous atmosphere of Nuremberg. When I listen to Wagner, I feel as though I am hearing the rhymes of an earlier world. It is my guess that one day science will find, in the wavelengths, there you go, frequencies, set in motion by Rheingold, secret connections within the world order, with the order of the world. The observation of the world perceived by the senses precedes knowledge brought forth by the exact sciences as well as by philosophy. It is to the extent that sensory knowledge approaches truth and that it has significance. So we are what we believe. We create our reality. So if they change what we believe, they change reality. The influence of Wagner was a decisive factor in the formation of Hitler's outlook. And it is no accident that the Führer chose Nuremberg, a city of master singers, as the site of the Nazi pageants, just as Jacques Bainville, who noted that Wagner and Nietzsche hoodoo. Nietzsche was the guy who was promoting the philosophy of nihilism earlier in this video. Nothing. Believe in nothing. That's what they want people to believe. They call the masses. They keep this information from the masses. It's in all the book they want to keep it from the masses. In the Freemason Masonic manuals, under threat of death, they can't divulge the information to the masses. And a horrible death, if you read the description or go watch my videos. Thus, the tragic bondage of gold, this cursed metal, is unequivocally condemned as being the endowment of Jewish materialism. If in this war it turns out that gold fights work, capital fights the people, gold fights work, capital fights people, and the people in reaction fights the progress of humanity, then works, people, and progress will win. The dropping of the gold standard in 1933 had already shown this determination to break with the past. We have devalued gold. It lies in our cellars and no longer has any value whatsoever, says Adolf Hitler. Well, we know that's not the case now. Moving on. Just my highlighted portions. Likewise, Hitler was convinced that he alone understood Wagner. It was not just thinking about Wagner's musical genius, but about the entire Wagnerian view of Germanic culture, which was a revolutionary doctrine right down to the smallest detail. Reigh believed that Wagner, continuator of the Neo-Catholicism of the troubadours, was the major factor in Hitler's decision to become a vegetarian. All right, moving on here. Wagner, this modern troubadour, the musician, playwright, writing these themes of ancient gods and activities, had had a revelation. He had heralded the tragic destiny of the Germans. He was not only a musician and a poet, but the greatest prophetic figure of German people had ever had. Hitler had happened early upon Wagner's doctrines. So I guess we can talk about Helenita Blavatsky's secret doctrines, or Albert Pike's morals and dogma, or Aleister Crowley's The Law of One, the evilest man alive. His book, Thou Shalt Do Whatever Anyone Wants to Do. Chaos and anarchy, as George Bush Sr. said, will bring about the New World Order. A rule of law. So if they make a law that says that any person not being productive to society should go to the gas chamber or guillotine, I guess that's the law. You got to love their rule of law. It works for them, not for us. What an exaltation bordering on the morbid. By predestination, he discovered that everything he had read of this great mind echoed intuitive ideas which lay dormant, so to speak, in the depths of his own consciousness. That's Hitler's thinking that, writing that. But it will be the Grail myth, the focal point of Wagner, not Catharism, that Hitler will see as the most important symbol in which to coalesce his view of the world. Should the masses be allowed to follow their own inclinations, or should we stop them? Think about this now. This is the question. Should the masses be allowed to follow their own inclinations, or should we stop them? Hitler. Should we create an elite of real initiates and order? A religious brotherhood of Templars to guard the Holy Grail, the august vessel containing the pure blood. We have, moreover, to understand Parsifal in a different way than the usual interpretation, which is that of given by example by the poor old Wozinger. Behind the polite exterior, the sarcastic bric-a-brac of pseudo-Christian claptrap, that's what it says here, weirdness of Good Friday, you can sense something profound and majestic. It is not the religion of piety, which you find glorified there according to the neo-Christian gospel of Schopenhauer. It is the cult of the noble and precious blood, of the pure, radiant gem around which has gathered the brotherhood of the valiant and the wise, the valiant and the wise. King Amorphortos suffers from an incurable illness, the corruption of his blood. The unworldly but pure hero has to choose between the delights of King's Lord's garden, which symbolizes the perversion of the corrupt civilization, and the austere life of the knight who watch over the pure blood, the mystical source of all life. We are a part of this same drama. All of us are afflicted by the disease of the blood. All of us have been stained by radical contamination. Where can we find the cure and expiration? Wow. The eternal life obtained by the Grail is reserved only for those whose blood is pure, only to the noble. I am thoroughly familiar with Wagner's thought. At different times in my life, I always come back to him. Only a new aristocracy can secure us the blessings of a new culture. So there I said it. Only a new aristocracy can secure for us a new culture. So they want to have an elite group of people ruling the world like the Hunger Games movie. It says it here. The eternal life. I read that. So, here we get right to the heart of Hitlerian thinking in its lesser-known aspects. Indeed, the Führer confided to Reigh. Listen up, and I'll finish this video. Naturally, I am aware, as all your intellectuals, your fonts of knowledge, that there is no such thing as race in the scientific sense of the word. Well, I am a politician, and as such, I also need something enabling me to do away with the established order of things in the world and to overcome history by destroying it. To overcome history by destroying it. Do you understand what I'm getting at? This is Hitler talking. The world must be freed from its historical past. The nations are the raw materials of man's history. I must brew these nations and fashion them into something more noble. If I want to put an end to the chaos of a historical past that has become absurd. To accomplish this task, the notion of race is most useful. It does away with the old ideas and the open possibilities for new combinations, taking as its starting point the principle of nation. France pushed its great revolution beyond its frontiers. With the notion of race, National Socialism will use its own revolution for the establishing of a new world order, says Hitler. And a lot of us know, at the end of World War II, 100,000, I don't know, 50,000, but of the elitist Germans in something called Project Paperclip were secretly brought to the United States and other places in the world. And this is what's their thinking, scientists, philosophers, whoever. And a lot of people think that this philosophy, thinking, was the people might have lost the war, and German people might have been slaughtered, but the elitists were scurried away. The scientists, all those people. Argentina, the United States, Brazil, France, England, Russia. And so it seems this philosophical thinking, where it says right here that overcome history by destroying it, and only a new aristocracy can secure for us the blessings of a new culture. In this book, it seems like that philosophy now controls the United Nations, it controls the New Age push, the gay agenda, the destruction of Christianity, depopulation. The people who are responsible for all that are doing the sky spraying, the HAARP transmitters, dozens of, half a dozen, 8, I don't know, microwave, gigantic fields of transmitting antennas, beaming energy off the ionosphere over a city or anywhere they want to on the planet, X-raying the planet with satellites in space, looking for ancient archaeological sites. They're looking for something. Secrets. Zachariah Stitchin's in his books, and so many more that I've gone over, then I will go over some new ones. But this cosmology, this New Age, and Lucifer Publishing Company was one of the big publishers in New York City that was publishing this New Age material. And it says right in the label in the book, Lucifer Publishing Company. And then they changed it to Lucas Publishing Company. And Lucifer or Lucas both mean light. So it's all orchestrated. There is some grand plan. And like the Pope who sent a video out on the internet, or to all the religious leaders of the world, saying we might as well unite, we don't have any differences any longer. And they want an aristocracy to lead the rest of us, and probably they're going to require everybody to be microchipped when they cause the stock market or the dollar to crash. A fabricated, intentional event. That's my thinking. That's what it seems like to me. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Miracle reporting.